Can everybody see my welcome to the Oklahoma Collective slide? I hope.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Today we have just an odd mishmash of tips and little hints that I hope will help you in various aspects of bidding. In particular, I've listed them here. I've got two of them on Who's Your Friend, strategic bidding, bidding after a preempt, how to get extra tricks, 8 ever, 9 never, all these kinds of things. And then I said 10 tips, but there's actually a bonus tip. So I want to make one really Who's Your Friend? Well, I think most of you play with people who are your friends, that they're your partners, and you like them, or you wouldn't necessarily be playing with them, particularly if they're a regular partner. But there's only one person in the room who's always on your side. And sometimes people tend to forget that. That, of course, is the person sitting directly opposite. So that means that bridge partnerships are a lot like a marriage. And you've heard me say that many times. Anything that undermines trust can't be good for the partnership. If you have certain agreements on what kind of hands you're going to open or what bids mean what when, do your very best to abide by your agreements. If you overcall at the 2 level and you and your partner have agreed that a 2 level overcall should actually mean something, then adhere to your agreements, basically, is what I'm saying. And remember, you're in charge of bidding your hand. When you have people whose styles don't mesh well together, one is a very aggressive bidder, the other one maybe is a bit timid, sometimes that doesn't work very well. If the aggressive bidder thinks that the timid bidder is just not likely to bid his hand, he gets too aggressive. Well, sometimes that works, but very often it doesn't. Sometimes you'll go off because the aggressive bidder just was way too aggressive. And that makes the timid bidder that much more timid. So when one of you overbids consistently and the other one underbids consistently, what happens when you actually bid correctly, when you've actually described your hand accurately? Well, then somebody's liable to overbid or underbid anyway. So one of the important things here is whatever your agreements are, your styles need to mesh well also. And that means that it's important for both of you to bid your values appropriately. And yes, I will admit that when you are learning to bid, you have to overbid quite a bit until you learn when you're overbidding. There's only one way to learn that, and that's by table time, playing at the table. So when you're first learning, you tend to be, a lot of people tend to be a little bit conservative, and then they figure out, or they hear somebody like me say, oh, this game belongs to the bidders, and they start bidding a lot. And then first thing you know, they've gotten way aggressive and they're going down all the time. This is part of the learning process. You have to learn how to bid and how to push the envelope. That doesn't mean you're always going to know when to stop, of course, because of the random nature of the hands. But some experience will help you learn to judge. And it's important to be patient with yourself and with your partner when you're doing this kind of thing. It can be very easy to get frustrated in this type of situation, especially when you've had a run of, like I do from time to time, where you just can't buy a point even. You know, no matter what choice you have to make, it's the wrong one. And we all go through periods like that, and it doesn't mean that you're getting senile or that you're not smart enough to play the game or anything like that. Remember, when you do well together, or when you do well, you do well together. When you do poorly, you do poorly together. The outcome for a pair in a game is very seldom determined by just one member of the partnership. Very often, it's a combination of this. Well, this one made a big boo-boo on this hand, and this, all that kind of thing. So be patient with each other. It's a process, and try to enjoy the process if you can. Now, here's the second part of this question. Who's your friend? The other person in the room who's your friend is the director. Actually, he's not your friend as much as he is your lawyer. The director is there to make sure, like Roy said, he's much like the umpire in a softball game. He's there to see that the game runs smoothly and to restore equity in the event of an irregularity. What does that mean anyway? Well, it means if there was a boo-boo or something happened that was contrary to one of the laws, that there are certain ways of restoring equity that the ACBL has prescribed, and it's the director's job to know what those remedies are. His job is not to get anybody at all. The laws do change periodically, and it's the director's jobs to keep up with those changes. And the reason for the changes is they're trying to emphasize equity and not to catch people to punish them. When should you call the director? Whenever there's an irregularity. Even if you are a director yourself and you know what the ruling should be, you don't rule at your own table. I never rule at my own table, and I never allow the opponents to rule at my own table. I call the director. Even if it's not a big deal, you call the director. If you call the director late, you may lose some of the rights to some of the options that would have been available to you had you called at the appropriate time. And calling the director, even if your opponents are your friends, is totally appropriate. It doesn't mean that you are trying to get them. We're just trying to make sure that the game runs according to the laws of the ACBL. No one should take offense when you call the director, ever. And a lot of times, you may be familiar with complicated that most people realize. Some of the directors find some of the laws and rulings to be very complicated, but you'll never go wrong by calling the director. If you have a question about the ruling, I had a guy one time who was a very experienced player, and I was a very green director, just turn to me and say very nicely, "Would you read me that section of the law book, please?" I did, and he says, "Oh, okay, I guess I was wrong." "Yes, Don." Oh, thumbs up. Okay, good deal. And don't forget, when you stick your hand in the air, if you say director and you don't keep your hand in the air in a room full of people, the director does not know who called, particularly if he can't hear well. And the other thing is, every director's last name is please. So say director, please, and raise your hand and keep it raised until the director spies you and acknowledges that he has heard your call. Things will go a lot smoother, and there won't end up being hurt feelings and all of that. I mean, but I moved on down the road. The sun still comes up in the east every morning. So, you just have to take that attitude about it. I felt that I had been damaged by that bid, but the director's point was, we can't force people to make absolutely correct bids, and you run into stuff like that all the time. So now, number 3 here. I put this in here because I have noticed as I play in more of the higher limit games that a lot of the experts don't bid nearly as much as players in the lower limited games are. A lot of people have taken this business about bidding and bidding and bidding to the point where they're a bit pushy. I have been guilty on more than one occasion of pushing opponents into a game they were never going to bid. It was making all day long, and I pushed them right into it. They didn't necessarily have the values, but the way their hands fit together, they were going to make that game bid all day. And my partner preempted, and I had a nice fit, a 3-card fit, and I would just bid at the 3 level right away. And a lot of times the opponents would go on and bid the game, and I'm thinking, oh well, hey, I pushed them into game. I hope we can set them. Well, many's the time we couldn't. And we got a poor result because I bid too aggressively. So, for instance, if your partner opens 2 spades and your right-hand opponent bids 3 hearts, I've shown some examples here. If I'm holding that second one, I've got 11 high card points. My partner has fewer than 10. My holding in hearts isn't great. I'm looking at 2 tricks. My partner has, maybe another one in spades, but he doesn't promise more than 5 or 6 points to open 2 spades. If I'm looking at that second example where I might be tempted to bid 3 spades, I don't think I can set 4 hearts. But if I bid 3 spades, then I may just push my left-hand opponent into 4 hearts. He may bid 4 hearts anyway, and if he does, oh well. But if I have pushed him into a game that he wouldn't have bid otherwise, then I've gotten a poor result. Now, with this first example, I'm going to bid 4 spades. So if they're going to try to make a game, they're going to have to bid 5 hearts. So on the first hand here, I would bid. If I have a better hand with this second one, then, and I think that I have enough to set 4 hearts, then I will probably try to bid 3 spades. This is what I'm talking about being a really pushy bidder. Marty Bergen was a very, very pushy bidder, very aggressive bidder, but he had the card skills to back it up. He's the one who always said, colors are for children. Well, I guess I'm a child because colors matter to me. If I get doubled and go down 2 or 3, I'm not very happy if the opponents can only make 420 for their game. So this kind of advice is not to say that you should ignore the law of total tricks. Just use it judiciously. Either bid the full maximum of your hand, don't do it in pieces, in other words, or think seriously about whether you will be pushing the opponents into game. When your partner preempts, you can give him an average of 7 or 8 points. Look at what you have. And if you think that the opponents have enough to bid and make a game, you might reconsider raising that preempt, extending the preempt. A good deal of the time, it's the right thing to do. But many times you just push opponents into games that they wouldn't bid otherwise.
Susan, question in the chat about the rule of 17 and whether that is less important than law of total tricks, or how does that figure into the decision?
Well, when my partner has preempted, I use the law of total tricks and I count tricks. I know Mel likes the rule of 17, but when you preempt, it's not about points, it's about tricks. When your partner opens with a vulnerable weak 2, he should promise you 6 tricks. Maybe 5 tricks from the trump suit and an outside trick, or maybe all 6 tricks from a solid trump suit. Not vulnerable, he should promise you 5 tricks. Look at your hand and see what you can come up with. That's a more accurate way of doing it than applying the rule of 17. Until you get proficient at counting tricks, though, it might be useful to use the rule of 17 and then follow it up with trying to count tricks. And in this way, you can compare what your results are and how the hand actually ends out. The rule of 17 can be very valuable for less experienced players. If there are those of you out there who don't know what that is, that just means take your number of cards in the suit where your partner preempted and add it to your number of high card points. If it's 17 or more, bid the game. So in other words, most of the time, you're going to have an opening hand or better than minimum, particularly if you only have 2 trumps in your hand. You're going to have at least 15 points. I tried it one time with 16 high card points and a singleton in my partner's suit, and that did not turn out well. So don't try to do it with just one card support. Your partner only has 7 of them, and it's going to be harder for your partner. So if it's a week 2 bid, you need to have 2 cards in your partner's suit at least. So that would be my suggestion. If you're not proficient at counting tricks, use the rule of 17, but then practice trying to count tricks and seeing how this comes out. Look at the end of the hand and see, maybe I didn't count tricks accurately. Maybe I was a little too aggressive. Maybe I was too conservative. Over time, you will learn how to count tricks and how high you should bid. This is another one of those things that comes to you when you put enough time in at the table. Okay, here's another little tip that applies when your partner has preempted. My statement here is the most effective preempts are the ones that put the maximum pressure on the opponents. Absolutely, they steal the most bidding space. The more you can force your opponents to guess at a high level, the more likely it is they'll make a mistake. So, looking at these 3 auctions, your partner opens a week 2 spades and the next person doubles, and then you bid 4 spades. This is the first auction. Partner opens a week 2 spades. Right hand opponent doubles. You pass. Advancer bids 3 hearts. Your partner passes. He has preempted and he shouldn't bid again unless he's forced. And now the doubler bids 4 hearts. And now you bid 4 spades. The other one is 2 spades by your partner, double. You pass again, 3 hearts by the advancer, pass, pass. Now you bid 3 spades. Which one of these auctions is the most effective for your side?
Number 1.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, number 1 is the most effective. If you have 4 card support and you're planning to bid the game, do it immediately. The problem with auctions 2 and 3 is you gave the opponents sufficient space to exchange information. They got to the heart game on number 2. They know they have hearts. They're well positioned to decide whether to double 4 spades for penalty or to bid 5 hearts. Same thing with number 3. Same thing with number 3. What is the advancer going to do? He just bid 3 hearts and then his partner passed. But he may say, well, I actually am really close to having a 4 heart call here. I could bid that. So if you're going to support your partner's preemptive bid the most you're willing to bid with your first bid and then shut up. Put the maximum pressure on your opponents that you can. 2 spades, double 4 spades is very effective. You may not make 4 spades, but if you're weak and you just happen to have 4 spades in your hand, the odds are really good that your opponents have a heart game, or at least something very close to it. So this is an example of using the law of total tricks to maximum benefit. Another really good way to decide whether to preempt and whether to extend the preempt is to use the rule of 2, 3, and 4. Now, I'm not sure how many of you know the rule of 2, 3, and 4, so I went into it a little bit here. This is another effective tool that you can use to help you make these decisions. It compares your potential tricks to vulnerability, links the two together. It tends to make you a bit more conservative in your preempting. You know, Mike Lawrence has made the point many, many times that most of us don't preempt nearly as often as we should. But it can be scary to bid at a high level with viewpoints. You know, I admit that totally. So here's an example. This is a pretty good spade suit here, isn't it? I love having a spade suit like that. This one is an easy 2 spades at any vulnerability as far as I'm concerned. The guideline is that at unfavorable vulnerability, that means that you are vulnerable and the opponents are not. When you open with a preempt, you should be within 2 tricks of making the 2 bid. You could expect to get 6 tricks in spades here. You have bid to the 8 trick level. So this one meets the guideline here of 2, 3, and 4 for preempting at unfavorable vulnerability. When both sides are either vulnerable or not vulnerable, in other words, equal vulnerability, you should be within 3 tricks of making your bid. With this hand, you don't have anything but 6 points and a really nice 6-card heart suit. Since you're missing the ace, you can be pretty sure that you're going to take 5 tricks in hearts. So bidding 2 hearts here is a good bet at equal vulnerability. At unfavorable vulnerability, you take a big risk. If your partner has the ace of hearts or if he has a nice hand for you, everything will be fine. But if he has the weakest hand at the table, then you're not going to be fine. This is part of the risk you take when you choose not to follow a guideline. Sometimes it'll be right, sometimes it'll be wrong. But that's why we have guidelines, to help us make decisions until we get a little more experience. And now at favorable vulnerability, in other words, you're white, the opponents are red, suggests that you can be within 4 tricks of your contract. But that doesn't mean here that I would want to bid 2 spades with this hand. My partner's going to lead spades. He may have had a much better lead option than spades, but being a good partner, he'll probably lead the suit that I bid if he's on lead. It's not going to be particularly productive unless he has the ace, king, queen of spades, right? So I don't suggest that being within 4 tricks of your bid is something that you'll want to do all the time. I would want a better suit. Instead of the ace of diamonds, I'd want to have the ace of spades. Change that to the ace of spades, and I might think about it. But with this hand, I'm not bidding 2 spades. There are a lot of people who might, because a lot of people don't care about being disciplined in their preempts. But that makes life hard on your partner. Your partner never knows whether you have this hand or whether you have this one right here that I showed you first. It's the same bid. The only difference is the vulnerability. So this is a chance that you take if you don't use some discipline in your week 2 bids. So now I put some examples in here on how to apply this guideline. Let's take a look at A here. What would any of you bid with A here if you were not vulnerable, or if the vulnerability were equal? What would you bid? Anybody? Your deal.
2 spades.
2 spades, sure. I bid 2 spades with that, even if I'm vulnerable, because I have 2 of the top 3 honors. My spot cards are not fabulous, but this meets my definition of a decent first chair week 2 bid. And I have spades. I love it when I have spades. So now, even if I were vulnerable, I would probably open that 2 spades. Do I make the rule of 6? No, or the rule of 2. I'm sorry, on 2, 3, and 4. I don't, but I have 2 of the top 3 honors. I don't have a void, and I don't have an outside 4-card major suit. So I would give serious thought to opening that 2 spades, even vulnerable, even though the guideline says be within 2 tricks at unfavorable vulnerability. Now, how about B here? What do we think about it? This is a little bit better hand, isn't it? If you're not vulnerable, what are you going to open here?
Two hearts.
Yeah, sure. I wouldn't even think about it. This is a good suit for a week 2 heart opening bid. At equal vulnerability, I do the same. I would do the same, definitely. I have only 5 tricks though, so if I'm vulnerable, I might sit and think for a minute. But boy, that suit just when I see King, Queen, Jack, I get really excited when I have the possibility of a 6-card suit headed by the King, Queen, Jack is a good suit. So now, how about C? This suit is not as good. What do you think here? And remember too that 2 diamonds doesn't have a whole lot of preemptive power. That is, the opponents can still bid a major suit at the 2 level comfortably. So a week 2 in diamonds isn't it doesn't take up as much space, doesn't crowd the bidding space as much as 2 of a major does. So that's the reason that a lot of people have other bids for a 2 diamond opening, other ways to use it. But let's say you and your partner do use week 2 bids in diamonds here. What do you think about preempting 2 diamonds here if you're not vulnerable?
No.
You've got maybe 5 tricks, right?
Yeah, maybe. This has a losing trick count of 8, which is typically a week 2 opening has a losing trick count of 8 or 9. This I wouldn't argue terribly if you were white and the opponents were red. That looks all right to me. But if I'm vulnerable, I'll think twice. Equal vulnerability, maybe. This is a reasonable non-vulnerable week 2 diamond opening, though. I think it's only ace jack, but if you're white and the opponents are red, they're less likely to double you. They're going to be trying to find their own suit fit rather than making a lot of money off of you usually, because you're not vulnerable. It pays them to find a vulnerable game.
Even if
Susan,
you don't have 2 of the top 3?
Well, if you're not vulnerable, I wouldn't have 2 of the top 3. I use that rule when I'm vulnerable, but I've got 3 of the top 6. That's my spot cards are pretty good. That's what I'm saying. It's reasonable if you're not vulnerable here. If you play disciplined week 2s, though, if you're vulnerable, you will not open that 2 diamonds. Janet, did you have a question?
Yes, I do, Susan. Isn't the purpose of a preempt just to get in, not necessarily thinking you're going to make your bid, but first of all, it describes your hand to your partner, but isn't it to get in the way of the opponents?
Absolutely. And that's why 2 diamonds is a less valuable preempt than 2 of a major. That's generally the idea, but you have to bear in mind that experienced opponents are going to look at their hands. They're going to feel free to double you when they think that you have overstepped. So particularly when you play against experienced players, you may get away with opening a really crappy week 2 bid. But if you're in the habit of doing that in an open game and other people know you are, they're likely to pull out the red card rather than look for their own game. And that can be very expensive. If you want to bid that way, your partner has to have a really good tolerance for bad scores. So this is another matter for partnership discussion. How disciplined are we going to be on week 2 bids?
Do you by any chance use the losing trick count in trying to decide whether to preempt?
Well, yes, I do. This next hand will show you why here. It is losing trick count to decide whether to open a week 2. All other things being equal, I will then finally look at the losing trick count and say, particularly if I'm thinking about a week 2 opening or an opening of 1 of a suit. Or maybe if it's a 9 loser hand, then and I'm vulnerable and the opponents are not, I may think better of opening the week 2. This is, and I'm here to tell you folks, I don't always make the right choice. But I've just learned that there are some things that I have to take into account. And if I don't take them into account, I often live to regret it. But that doesn't mean that I always make the right call. I don't. And none of you should expect to make the right call either. The secret to developing a decent bidding system, though, is not to be too results oriented on one particular hand. Go with what works over the long haul. So this brings me to hand D. I have 6 decent spades. I have 4 hearts, and I have a hand with a lot of shape. Some of you may have heard the expression 6-4 bid more. Well, what do we think about this hand?
Two spades.
Anybody in favor of opening 2 spades? I heard Jane, was that you? 2 spades?
Yes.
You might miss a 4-4 heart fit.
Well, that's right. There are people who use disciplined week 2s who do not open a week 2 bid when they have an outside 4-card major. When you preempt, you basically announce to your partner that this suit has to be trumps. When you have an outside 4-card major, that's not the case, is it? I have a possibility, even though it's a crappy suit, hearts might be an acceptable trump suit. Now, some of you are going to roll over and scream when I say this, but if I open this hand at all, I'm opening it 1 spade. It does not make the rule of 20, but I have a rebid, and my partner can then either choose 2 hearts or he can take a preference back to 2 spades. If he bids 2 clubs or 2 diamonds, forcing me to game, then I'm going to rebid my spades. Probably. I mean, he'll show me 4 hearts if he has them. But I'm not going to open this hand 2 spades myself. But that's up to you and your partners. Maybe you don't care about an outside 4-card major. But we've talked about the advantage of playing in a 4-4 major suit fit, the holy grail of bridge, over playing in a 5-3 or a 6-2. So depending on how seriously you take that and how much of a purist you are, you might not want to open this hand 2 spades. This is a matter for partnership discussion totally. Admittedly, that heart suit is weak, but if you have the kind of spade suit that would make you consider opening 2 spades, you're not likely to have enough points left over to have a very good second suit, are you? So in this case, if I'm going to bid, I'll open 1 spade. My partner bids 1 no trump forcing. I'll bid 2 hearts and let him choose. And hopefully we can get out at the 2 level. If not, it wasn't our hand. Maybe it belonged to the opponents all along. But I didn't go down without a fight. Now here's another one. What do we think about this one right here? Is this a 2 spade opening?
Mm-mm.
Why not?
No, it's too strong.
wrong. Absolutely. And you have a very nice 5-card suit here. This is a 1 spade followed by clubs bid twice. That would show at least 5 spades and 5 clubs, or maybe 6 spades and 5 clubs. But this is not a 2 spade opening. Much too good a hand. How about F here? You don't have a lot, and your suit has the ace and king, and then the spots are really cruddy. And that's all you have in your hand. What do you think?
Not vulnerable, yes. Vulnerable, no.
Well, I'm hard pressed not to open a weak 2 when I have ace king in my suit.
Hmm.
I really like having the ace and king. 2 diamonds still allows the opponents to get into the bidding, yes, but maybe my partner has something in diamonds and maybe he doesn't. He can bid 3 diamonds without pushing anybody into a game. So I even vulnerable, I have 2 of the top 3. I have 8 points. That's not the 5, 6, or 7 that it's the low end. Admittedly, the jack of clubs is probably worthless, but I would think very hard about it, if nothing else, for the value in lead directing to my partner.
Yeah,
Really like my partner to lead a diamond. So now then, how about G? This hand only has 10 points in it, but look at how shapely it is. It makes the rule of 20 for opening in the first or second seat. So you've got a rebid here. If your partner bids a spade, you can either rebid 2 clubs or you can rebid 2 hearts. I would lean strongly toward rebidding 2 hearts, but that's just me. I think that this one is a 1 heart opening, even though it only has 10 high card points in it. It makes the rule of 20. So think hard about that. There's nothing wrong with opening that 2 hearts. You don't have another 4-card major. You don't have a void. But it understates the strength of the hand a bit to open it with a weak 2, I think.
Janet has a question.
Go right ahead.
Janet? You're muted, Janet.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yesterday I had a hand that had 9 high card points. I had 7 diamonds, king, queen, 10, 9, 8. I have a 6 loser hand. I'm trying to decide, do I preempt this 3 or do I open it 1? And I thought it's too strong
for you and your partner to discuss.
Yeah. Well,
your hand has a valuation of 12 points, but I would look at the vulnerability. What were you the dealer, or were you second seat, or what were you?
yeah, I was first seat and we were vulnerable. I made the decision to open it up 1 diamond and rather than 3. My partner goes to 3, no. We're down 2.
Oops.
And she felt I should have taken her out of that, but I'm afraid now if I bid 4 diamonds, she's going to take me to 5.
Well,
So I just
yeah, Janet, you're right about that. You never take a partner out of 3 no trump to 4 of a minor out of weakness. You just don't do that. You have to be aware when you open that 1 diamond, though, that your partner is going to take you for 12 high card points, and maybe well distributed or maybe not. This is a subject for partnership discussion. When I can come to 12 points with high card points and length, do I open it 1? I consider an 11-point hand with a 6-card suit to be a 1 bid, because I don't preempt with anything that has more than 10 high card points in it. But you only had 9. This one is close.
I have 9 and a singleton.
Yeah. I think it's really close. What I open there would depend on which partner I was playing with, because my partners have different degrees of conservatism. Some are, one partner in particular is very aggressive. Another one is pretty conservative. So it would depend on who my partner is, what our agreement is, what the vulnerability is, what seat I'm in, all those things. Obviously, this one didn't work out well for you, but the next time it might. So I think it's worthy of talking about, Janet, and maybe not discarding that altogether. It didn't work out there, but it might in the future.
Okay.
That's,
All right. Thank you.
as I said,
Susan,
a lot of times there are no hard and fast rules.
Susan,
Yes.
on G, Susie Graves asked, I thought you used the rule of 20 plus 2.
Well, I do a lot, but a lot of people use only the rule of 20. But looking at this hand myself, I will open at one heart. This hand has so much shape that I think the playing strength is greater than 2 hearts would indicate. That's another thing you have to think about. This last hand is another example of that. Notice there are only 9 points in this hand, but look at the playing strength that it has. With 6 spades and 5 clubs, I'm opening that 1 spade all day long. And then I'll rebid clubs. If my partner bids hearts, I'm going to be loath to bid 3 clubs with only 9 high card points, but I am 6-5. That's one time when I will go to the 3 level like that, when I have extreme distribution. Then I'll bid my spades again, and my partner should be able to figure out that my hand is all black by the time I've made 2 or 3 bids, and then hopefully we'll choose accordingly. So on the last one here, I'm opening at 1 spade. Look at that counts as a 5 loser hand. That doesn't mean that I'm going to bid 1 spade and jump to 3 clubs. I'm not going to, but I'm thinking that this hand has enough playing strength in it that it's a 1 bid. This is another thing that you learn to think about. Yes, I could open this 2 spades, but if my partner has a void in spades and 4 or 5 clubs, we belong in clubs because I have another suit that could be the trump suit. When that's the case, I tend not to want to preempt, but that's a decision that each of you guys would need to make. These are all things that I think about, and I don't, as I've said before, I don't always make the right choice. I don't know even of an expert that always makes the right choice in this situation. You just make the best decision you have with the facts that you know. So let's move on to the next subject here now. A lot of people like to make a brilliant bid or a brilliant play. You know, they spend a lot of time looking for a trump coup or a Deschapelle coup or a pseudo squeeze or an out of the blue Q bid, something like that. Those come along so seldom that trying to think about it and do it almost guarantees that you won't get very good results. You, like I said earlier, you go with the percentage plays, go with what works over time. If your so-called brilliant play were the right thing to do most of the time, then you would see it in a lot of the bridge books that are out there. There are bazillions of bridge books written on every subject that you can imagine out there. If your brilliant play or bid were the right thing to do in most situations, you'd find it in those books already. So if you concentrate on making the percentage plays, what's the odds favor, you'll come out on the right end more often than not. It's only very rarely that trying a brilliant play turns out well. The odds just don't favor it. And of course, we all tend to want to wish our partners good luck. But I read this little tidbit somewhere the other day, and I thought this is a really good thought. Good luck at the bridge table means that your trump suits break well, finesses are on, everything works well for you. You make an overtrick. Well, guess what, folks? If everything's on for you, everything's on for all the other declarers in the room. I would rather be presented with a more challenging hand. Gives me a chance to really practice what I've been studying on play of the hand, for instance. Maybe look for an extra trick that other people don't find. Or realizing that, hey, suits tend to break 3-2 here on average 60, 62, 68% of the time, but a 4-1 break is about 1 in 4. Could that hurt me? What can I do if the outstanding trumps are 4-1? Thinking about things like that gives me a chance to consider all the possibilities and to make a really good choice. So rather than good luck, I'd rather have interesting hands, things that present a bit of a problem that may or may not occur to every other declarer in the room. In other words, be a tiger. Everybody will make the easy hands. But when you get a tough hand that comes along, there's your chance to get a really good board. So take advantage of it. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't work. And even though you've thought of it and all of that, nothing works out and you don't get a good score. Well, it worked out the same way for everybody else in the room too. So consider that next time you're playing a hand. This next little tip is just something that I wanted to throw in because I see so many people overcalling really ridiculous suits, particularly at the 2 level. Some people will say, well, I wanted to bid because I had an opening hand and my right hand opponent opened in front of me and well, you didn't have a takeout double and you don't have a 5-card suit. I had 13 cards in my hand, or I had an opening hand is not a reason to overcall, folks. Once in a blue moon, it might sit on the table. So what are the good reasons to overcall then? Well, it might be our hand. Just because your right hand opponent opened doesn't mean that you and partner don't own the hand. But in case you don't, you can suggest an opening lead to your partner. That's why your suit needs to be good. Maybe you can steal bidding space, particularly if you have a weak jump overcall in spades, for instance. If your right hand opponent opens a diamond and you can bid 2 spades, that's pretty effective at stealing the bidding space. Sometimes if you and your partner can find a fit, you can push the opponents up a level. Maybe they can't make it. I've had very good luck pushing opponents up a level lately. There are a lot of people who just cannot resist taking the push. If you push them, they bid a level higher and then they go off one. You'd be surprised how often that works because doggone it. Okay, I'll let you. That's my idea about it. And then, of course, you may be able to sacrifice profitably. If the opponents have a fit in hearts, you probably have a fit in spades or in some other suit. Maybe you can take a profitable sacrifice. All of these are good reasons to overcall. I've given an example here. This hand has 10 high card points in it. Your right-hand opponent opens a heart and you're holding that crappy spade suit. Are you really going to overcall that? If you overcall a spade, your partner will lead spades. He may or may not have any spade honors, or he may have the king and underlead it. Or maybe he has, let's say he has the queen, jack, 10 of clubs, and he would like to lead the queen. Or maybe he has the king, queen of diamonds, and he was planning to lead a diamond. If he leads a spade, you've lost the advantage that having the first chance to lead gives to the defense. It's called the tempo. And when you have the advantage of tempo, that's really worth something. The other thing is that this is the worst shape that you can have for an overcall. The 5-3-3-2 shape is the so-called death shape for an overcall. It's the most balanced overcall you can generally have. And so all of these things argue against bidding a spade here. Yeah, it doesn't even really take up any bidding space. And if your left-hand opponent was planning to respond to spade, well, now he knows that that's not going to happen. That's not a good idea. And the thing is that you've scared him away from the opponents away from maybe finding a 4-4 spade fit with a 5-0 trump split. I wouldn't mind that at all myself. So there are several reasons why you might not want to bid sitting in the second seat when your right-hand opponent has opened a heart. Just think about that. Now, how can I get extra tricks? Well, here are some of the more common ones. You can rough in the short trump hand. Notice I didn't say just rough. Roughing in the long trump hand never adds to your trick total. It gives you control of the suit, but it does not add to your trick total. So roughing in the short trump hand, any 4-3 suit or 5-0 suit or better in the dummy can be set up for discards. A 5-card suit in the dummy should never be ignored. If you need extra tricks, look for setting up a 5-card suit. That has saved more contracts than you can imagine. There's always the famous finesse. Most good players will go to great lengths to avoid taking a finesse because it's only a 50-50 shot. Instead, they'll try to set up and execute an in play or a loser-on-loser play. These plays can be 100%, not 50%. You can try a cross rough, or instead of a regular finesse, a roughing finesse. The hold-up play can be just as effective at suit contracts as it is at no trump. And of course, there's the infamous squeeze play. Squeeze plays are not typically taught to inexperienced players, but over the course of the next year or two, I plan to present a little bit on the in play and the loser-on-loser play in particular, because those are fairly easy to learn and execute. The squeeze play is more complicated, but is also a very effective tool. So when you're declarer, run through all your options before you settle on one plan. If you can find a spot, even for one extra trick, that might get you a 60 or 65% board instead of a 50% board. Every little bit counts when you're playing match points. I think you've all heard of this next one, 8 ever, 9 never. I was shocked the first time somebody ever tried for the drop of a king, and he says, well, I had 9 cards. Isn't it 8 ever, 9 never? Now, this applies only when you're missing the queen. It says to take a finesse for the queen if you can. Maybe you don't have the jack or the 10. But to play for the drop if you have the ace and king, all other things being equal. The chances for the finesse to win, if you don't have any other information about the hand, is 50%. Playing off the ace and king when you have 9 cards in the suit will drop the queen about 52% of the time. That is not much of an advantage, but anything you know about the hand can change those odds in favor of a finesse. Let's say one of your opponents preempted, but you and your partner bought the hand anyway. The odds are that the other player who has more empty spaces in his hand to hold the queen has that queen rather than the one who preempted. So be mindful of 8 ever, 9 never, but don't forget to remember the bidding. And if you're looking for a queen in a side suit, play off some of the other suits first to see what you can discover about the hands. If you can figure out that, oh, well, this hand over here had 10 high card points in it that I found so far, he can't possibly have this queen, because if he did, he'd have opened the bidding. Using techniques like that is called using a discovery play, and it can be really, really helpful. You have to concentrate and focus a lot when you're doing this, but here's some examples. For instance, this first one has 8 cards in the suit. Are you going to finesse here? You bet. You have the Jack 10 9. You're not in danger of setting up a second trump trick or side suit trick for the opponents, because you not only have the Jack, you have the 10 and the 9 also. With number 2, you're missing 2 honors. But once again, here you have the Jack 10 9 8. Odds are that the 2 missing honors are split, 1 in each hand. If they're both offside, you're always losing 2 tricks. If they're both onside, you should be able to pick up one of them at least. On number 3, you have a 9-card fit. If when you lead the ace or the king and honor drops, finesse the other player for the missing honor. That's using something called the principle of restricted choice. It says that if a player drops an honor, it's because he had no other choice, that he is restricted because that's the only one he has. Most of the time when an honor falls, when you hold 9 cards in a suit, the other player has the other honor. Number 4, we're missing the king here. So 8 ever, 9 never doesn't apply. And a finesse is definitely appropriate. Number 5, same thing. But on number 6, we have 9 cards again, and we should play for the drop unless we know something about the hand that would make us think otherwise. So,
Hey, Sid, if you wouldn't mind backing up for just a second to those on when you're finessing on, let's say, the first 3 particularly, are you doing it with the Jack or the 10 or a low card?
well, it depends on whether I have entries to this hand on the right, to the dummy hand over here. If I have entries, I'll probably lead low to the 9 first. But if entries are a problem, I will start by leading the Jack so I can repeat the finesse with the 10 if it works. Missing 2 honors, though, I expect to lose the first one. On number 4, same thing. If I have limited entries to the dummy hand, I'll start with the 10. If I have plenty of entries, for instance, I might start with a low card if I'm trying to cater to the fact that somebody has a singleton king somewhere. That can be particularly important. Now, I have good intermediates here in these suits. If I didn't, I'd be particularly concerned. If you're concerned that there is a singleton king out there, well, and you think that your right-hand opponent has it, lead low and see if the king pops. If it doesn't, you can always play one of your minor honors here. So there are other considerations. When you have 10 trumps, particularly like number 5, if you're missing the queen here and not the king, you do not finesse holding 10 cards, because the odds of a 3-0 split are rather low, like 5 or 6%, something like that. But missing the king, you always finesse when you have 10. The only time you don't finesse missing the king is when you have 11 cards. Then you play for the drop. It's slightly more likely that the king will drop, that the missing cards are 1-1 rather than 2-0. Does that make sense, Rick?
Yes, thank you very much.
This last one here is something that you sometimes see newer players do. I know it's pretty sexy to learn new conventions and try to use them, but as somebody who added too many too fast when I first found out about conventions, I just thought they were the best thing since sliced bread. I wanted to play all of them. I managed to get myself so confused in several instances that I really impeded my progress a bit because I stacked too many on top of each other. I present a lot of information about conventions here in this lesson series, but I never recommend that anybody adds them until you and your partner have decided that you want to and would find it helpful. Some of them will give you more bang for your buck or return on investment than others. You know, my standard 4 always. I think everybody should work on learning those 4 before you think about any more of them. And remember, when you add a convention to your bidding box, you've got to expect that you're going to mess it up. Not just once or twice, but maybe 9, 10, or 12 or 20 times before you and your partner really have it. But if it's a valuable convention, for instance, like the Jacoby forcing raise, I think that's worth the effort that it takes to learn it because it helps you find really big fits quickly. And it enables the opener to show shortness. These are 2 very important things. So I think that one is worth it. But when you start talking about some of them that are obscure, that very, very seldom come up. I had it on my card for about 5 years and it never came up. Then as soon as I took it off, it came up with another partner and I missed it. I mean, it just hardly ever comes up. So things like that, you might want to think twice. Yeah, it can be handy sometimes, but it doesn't, you have to pay too much rent on the occupancy that it takes in your brain for the return that you get. So if you can improve your scores on 3/4 of your boards by learning to play and defend well first. Now, obviously, playing is easier if you get to the right contract. But defending in particular, if you can learn to be a good defender, you're going to get pretty good. You can be just an average player of the hand and an average bidder. But if you can defend well, you're going to do well in this game because you defend 50% of the time. About 25% of the time, you play the hands. And the other 25%, you're just a spectator. So if you can learn to defend and play well, you will find that your results improve. And my last one was a bonus about improving your game tries. Have a look at that one. I don't necessarily recommend this until you have mastered the 4 basic ones. But game tries, rather than just one patient into it, you will find that you very often get better results in getting to games or staying out of games that don't make. And I'm sorry I've run out of time here, but don't forget we're going to have a name change here in a couple of weeks, and we'll see y'all again next week, next Saturday at the regular time.
Hi, this is Susan. Thanks for watching this video today. Most of these videos come from our free bridge lessons that we present on Zoom every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time. If you'd like to join us for those lessons, you can email us at the address shown below and we'll send you the link. If you can't attend the lessons, then feel free to subscribe to our channel and you'll be notified when there is a new one added. Again, thanks for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.